Hey now, welcome to the 12th episode of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been here all along, welcome back. If this is your introduction to this podcast, well then welcome. The quote I want to start with today comes from Ed McGaugh in his book, Mother Earth Spirituality, Native American Paths to Healing Ourselves and Our World. The vastness of life around us helps eliminate self-centeredness. We are not doing the vision quest to make ourselves feel important or to be interesting to our friends, but to realize the vastness of the universe and our oneness with it. So I chose that quote for two reasons. One is that, well, I agree with it. I think there's a lot of, bragging basically about the psychedelic adventures that we may have within the psychedelic culture. But I think that gets away from the main point that it's all about just figuring out our place in the universe. And we really only need ourselves to compare that to. We don't need the validation of others. But I also chose that quote because it comes from a book talking about Native American paths to healing ourselves and our world. And the guest for this episode has a lot of interesting things going on. But one of the main things, and where I wanted to start our conversation, is his experience with sweat lodge ceremonies. So our guest today is Rich. How are you doing there, man?
Doing well over here.
Awesome. And as always, my co-host Stahn is on the line. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good today.
Awesome. So yeah, Rich, we've talked a couple times, and like I said, you're into a lot of cool things, and there's a lot of stuff we could talk about. But your experience with sweat lodges interests me the most. So why don't you just give a little background into when you started doing that and how you got involved with that, and we'll take it from there.
All right. I guess about 7 years ago, I owned a CrossFit gym, and a guy came in one day and he was playing around in the rings, and he wanted to invite me out to do a sweat lodge because I seemed like a decent enough person. We got to chatting and whatever. And he was into gymnastics and fighting. So he invited me out to his house, just come out and hang out, and he started telling me about the sweat lodge. And after a few visits with him, he took me out. We started doing sweat lodges that he had been doing for about a year or so. This is just a white guy, about my age, 35, 40. And we just started exploring the inside, just exploring the ceremony, the relationship with each other, the relationships with ourselves. And I guess in the first year or so, he met me in the spring, summer, and we did probably 15, 20 lodges over 12 months. And then the second year we did probably 30 to 40. And then it kind of tapered off, and I do probably two to four a year, sometimes with mushrooms, always with pot. And it's become an incredible tool for me for recentering. I can use it as a practice, doing one every few weeks, like you would do a deep meditation practice, or I just use it to reboot. Sometimes I'll go in there and dose pretty heavy. What for me is about 2.5 grams of mushrooms, and just kind of reset myself. Like if I got a lot going on, I'll get in there and figure out what the big issue is and how I can either work my mind around it or let it go or just manage it in some way. It's a terrific tool.
So, what do you think it is about it? Is it just kind of like the physical challenge and just kind of pushing your body to the limits to, let your your mind kind of dissociate a little bit from your body, because like with float tanks, like I find like, it's limiting distractions, but it's not really a challenging environment to where the sweat lodge seems like it'd be very physically challenging. Is it just, gaining that skill to separate the mind from the body?
There is a definite skill because it is intense. Um, let's talk about how it actually works for those who don't know what a sweat lodge is. Is that cool?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So the sweat lodge is about 10 to 12 trees that come out of the branches from trees that are made into a hut, and we tie it up with string and make about a 6 foot tall, probably 5 foot tall sweat lodge that can hold about 6 to 12 people seated upright. And the way it works is we cover it in blankets and tarps, dig a hole in the middle, and clean it all out. Outside there's a fire, and that fire burns stones. We use about 24 to 30 of them per lodge. We'll heat the stones up for about 2.5 hours, and it's usually a group activity where you sit there and you watch and you're just with the fire. It builds community, and you really get to know the people that you're going to be sweating with, because it's a very intimate experience. And so those will heat up for about 2.5 hours, and then when you get in, everybody lines up and we'll sage each other. We'll get down to our underwear or just a towel, and we'll sage each other, and as a ritual blessing. The stones before they were put in the fire are also blessed, and we do in the Navajo tradition of putting each stone in the 4 directions and then putting it into the fire. So everybody gets a sage cleanse before hopping in, and we crawl in, get in a big circle, and the stone carrier carries the stones. We do about 8 to start, and they'll be glowing hot. When the stones get into the lodge in the bowl that we carved out, the door is shut. Everybody hops in, including the stone carrier. If he's participating, she's participating, and we'll sit there, and it's a series of 4 rounds, and this is the way we run it. And it's some taken from Navajo, other is just the way we enjoy running the lodge. So it'll be completely black inside the lodge with about 8 stones on that first round, and they'll be glowing. So all the light will be coming from the stones. So you get it's brighter than the tank. Where the tank you have no sensory input, but here you actually have the stones putting off some light. So my buddy who introduced me to this, he plays the harmonica, so he'll bring a few harmonicas in, and he'll play F sharp in and out, or he'll play the F. He'll play F in and out over and over again, just to get everybody used to the environment. So this may take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Times kind of dissolves while you're in there, because it's a very intense environment. So he'll play the harp for a little bit, and then we'll all sit up. And the first round is people pray for the people of the earth. And we'll just go around in a circle. You either meditate, you say something. And while this is happening, he's the leader of the lodge will throw water on the stones. And so it'll be very, very humid in there, up to 100% or a high percentage of humidity. And which usually, if it's too hot for most people, you hop down on the ground and you find a spot that's comfortable enough. You put your head under a blanket, but over time, there's a skill that builds of just being with the heat, being with the intensity, and letting that go. So we'll go around in the circle, And at the end of that, it depends on how many people you have in there. I mean, there are a lot of variables, but you have, you'll probably have 20-minute to 45-minute rounds. It depends on what you're doing and how deep people want to go. If it's really hot, the rounds are shorter. So what that first round ends with the door being cracked open and everybody relaxing. The stone carrier will go out there, grab another 6-8 stones, and that'll repeat. The second round, we pray for the earth, I think. And then the third round, we pray for, the first round, we pray for the people. Second round is for the people we know. And the third round is for ourselves. And however you want to pray or meditate or just even be with the experience, it is quite enough. So then those 3 rounds happen where you have 20 minutes to 45 minutes of being in the experience, and then the last round we do is either an open. There's no praying. Everybody just lays down and just really gets cleansed by the experience, and it just sweats it all out, spits, and whatever you need to do. And then the door cracks open. We all get out, have a meal, have some tea, smoke a joint, play some music, and that's our night.
Yeah, that's just, it's amazing. Like it seems like a really pure thing to do. I like that you're respecting the the cultural tradition as well. I think that's really good. How did you find it to be? How did you get the skill to be able to separate your mind from the intense body feelings you must be getting? Because for me, it seems like it took me a while to be able to separate my mind from what's going on in a float tank, but that's not a very extreme situation. And in fact, because of the distractions, it's easier for me to separate my mind. But, I'm picturing myself in a sweat lodge and would think that I would just be kind of worrying about the heat and dying the whole time to be able to, kind of get a spiritual experience out of it. Were you worried like the first time, or did it just kind of come easily?
Definitely wasn't easy. I remember the first lodge, he poured the water on the stones, and I was out in 2 minutes. I was like, "This is crazy. I'm getting out." But I was interested, so I kept going. And I think maybe the fourth one, I was able to sit through it all the way. But it's just the skill develops as you just become used to my skill developed as I became used to the idea that I'm not going to die, that this is okay. And I've done it once, and I can, when I close my eyes and I'm in the experience and I know that it's just affecting my skin, but deep beneath my skin, my heart is still beating and it's racing. I make my heart the grounding point of my meditation, and I just watch that and I try to slow it down. And I'll work with breath to slow down my heartbeat. And that's my grounding point, because I know that the stones, those are the only grounding points visually. So I have to ground myself to something else. And this is where meditation really helps, is, once you have something, what grounding is in your meditation practice, then then in the lodge, I can take that, and as those stones dissolve with color and light, it just becomes about my heart. So the skill for me was, and I developed this skill alone in the lodge for about a year. It was only a half dozen, maybe 10 lodges, but being alone in the lodge, either on substances or not, getting that skill down of you're not going to die. Here's what's actually happening, because you'll be sitting there and you'll feel it on your skin and it'll be roasting you, but you know that that's your skin and it's not you. And so you go down to the heart, and that was my grounding point. And I keep that heart in check, just watching the beats and keeping it from feeling like it's racing by controlling the breath. And that's the skill that developed from me.
Huh. Yeah, I mean it's
You're not going to die.
right. Yeah, I mean it has a lot of parallels to a tough psychedelic experience, honestly, because those are the same things I try to tell myself when I'm having a tough trip.
I get in the tank too.
Yeah.
Like this, because I'll get so far out there in the tank that I'll get panicked or paranoid and be like, you're not going to die, Rich. You're not going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are. It's important to be able to have that, dialogue with yourself and to be able to trust yourself and believe yourself. So, uh, when did you introduce mushrooms into it? How many times had you uh, done the sweat lodge before you did it with mushrooms?
I'm guessing it was pretty quick. I guess that it was about 6 months into doing lodges, so maybe 6, 8, 10 lodges before because we had talked about mushrooms. I come from a military background, and I had not done anything smoked, and it was anti-drug until 29 when all of this started up, and so I started smoking pot, and so we were doing pot in the lodges, and we were talking about psychedelics, and he had mentioned mushrooms, and I was intrigued, so I did some reading on them and watched some YouTube videos, and then he called me one night and said, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow morning? How about you come over right now and hang out?" And so I got just the dust of the rest of his mushrooms, and it might have only been like 0.2, 0.5 grams, but it cracked open my head to a new reality. I just couldn't believe it. And then coming out of that lodge was absolutely spectacular, especially when you've been through a lot of stress and those mushrooms are kicked in, and you walk out of that lodge and the cold air hits you, and it's just a magical environment already on mushrooms, but you're coming out of this cleansing experience. It's indescribable, but hopefully it's experiential for other people.
So the first time you did mushrooms was also in a sweat lodge?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Cause it's like, I'm like I said, I'm envisioning myself in the situation, and mushrooms can be difficult for me anyway. And I'm picturing myself like just going in the sweat lodge, even without weed, would be tough for me, I feel like. And then it's like throwing mushrooms in the mix. I'm I'm like kind of anxious thinking about myself in the situation, but that's pretty crazy. And I could see that, definitely that's a hell of a way to introduce yourself to mushrooms, even on a, half-gram dose at most. That's pretty insane. Now, do you like, what's the difference? Like, do you prefer mushrooms, or is it in there, or is it just kind of each experience is different, or is the sweat lodge so intense that it's kind of psychedelic in its own right?
It's definitely psychedelic in its own right if you let it be. If you can open your head, I think it's great in small doses. I mean, it's very open to transforming you and grounding you, just like mushrooms can, but in a more intense way at higher doses. But lower doses for me, crack open the head, but don't bring on so much paranoia. I've been kicked out a few times by the mushrooms, and they said, you're not supposed to be in here tonight. They'll just kick me right out, and then I'll just sit by the fire and kind of be with the fire and the people inside the sweat lodge experience. But everybody that we're with is really open to it. What your experience is your experience, and if you get kicked out, then I consider getting kicked out when the mushrooms tell me it's time to get the fuck out. But it's one of those safe spaces I hear about, where it doesn't matter where why you're there, what you're doing, you have your experience, sort of thing.
Yeah. Have you ever had anyone freak out in there, or is it everyone's kind of experienced in it and handles it well?
I think that No, I haven't seen anybody freak out. And we've had quite a few different people come in. No, not anybody freak out. The toughest is when people are having a good trip, but it's difficult in there, and it's hard for the other people around them to hear the moaning and maybe the crying. And if you're not used to being with somebody on a difficult trip, and they're having a good experience because they're cleansing themselves. But that's one of the tougher parts.
Yeah. No, it's
Staying in there is the toughest part, though.
Yeah.
Because you got to convince yourself that no, you're not going to get out. And whatever, I've got a bad back, and maybe that's the excuse that I find, or whatever excuses come to your head while you're trying to get away, fight or flight. They come up and they're very convincing because it's so hot in there. But if you can let go of it and to really just sit with the experience and maybe find that energy that comes from the harmonica, because as it's playing, especially on mushrooms, you can close your eyes and the closed eye visuals are coming from this harmonica and blasting you with love and wonderful kaleidoscope of colors. And you just feel so cleansed from this vibration that is filling this dome, and it's an entire world inside there.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty amazing. Once you can actually let go and be in the moment, like that the power of not so much music but sound, and the power of like vibration, and that you feel the vibration of the sound, and I could totally see that. That was my last difficult trip that I talked about in the last podcast episode. Out of all the things that I was trying to do to calm myself down, humming and singing, really helped. Like I could feel the vibration of my voice, like in my jawbone, basically. And it like kind of, I could feel it like kind of like counteracting the negative vibration that my brain was producing with negative thoughts to a peaceful vibration from a tune that I was humming that, felt comfortable. And it's definitely something I need to remember to do whenever I'm having a tough time. And I could definitely see, even without mushrooms in the sweat lodge, that would be comforting. I could definitely, see that, because even without the mushrooms, I feel like the extreme, physical challenge of the sweat lodge is almost recreating the physical challenge that I tend to have with mushrooms, with nausea and sweating and, uncomfortable feeling and feeling too hot and stuff like that. So I could definitely see that the just a simple harmonica note would really be comforting. I totally get that.
And some other people use drums, and they'll bring it like the natives out in Colorado use drums.
Yeah,
they'll bring it in there and just on it.
Yeah,
I've only done white. I've done one Lakota lodge by a Lakota guy up in Ohio, but all of the other ones are just white and just normal guy, whatever, normal, white guy stuff.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask. Like, how does the Native American culture feel about normal white people taking part in these ceremonies? Like, is it considered in their culture like a rite of passage, and that they really don't want white people doing it, or is it just some people feel it's okay and some don't, or do you know? Have you talked to any?
No, I mean, I've heard and I've talked, but I honestly look at it as a tool, and whether somebody approves it or disapproves of it, it's not my concern. Whether, I mean, I put as much intention into it as I can, and I love the Native tradition. I don't share some of the beliefs, but I think I use it clearly as a tool, just like the float tank is a tool, psilocybin, LSD. meditation, and your cell phone is a tool. I treat it like one of those, and there are ways that you can use it that'll help you. And we already have some traditions set up in the Native American cultures. But what their opinion is of it, I don't. You would have to ask all of them, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, well, right. I mean, well, and it's kind of like, I've talked about, before psilocybin mushroom, like shamanic rituals were introduced to, American culture from R. Gordon Wasson going down and getting a, shamanic, treatment from, Maria Sabina. It was kind of, they didn't want Americans. They didn't want white people taking part in that sacred tradition. And it was her kind of like, crossing the lines that kind of, started this worldwide interest in it, started the fire that's still burning. But other shamans in the Mexican culture, in that, mushroom religion, basically, were not happy with her doing that, and ended up burning her house down and stuff like that. And I didn't know if in the Native American cultures, like if there's people that take that ritual that seriously, that like they don't feel that white people should be doing it or not. And I guess like you said, I mean, there's some that do and some that don't, I guess. That
I don't think that the experience that we are having in the programming that we have set up for the lodge, right? The setting and the set, we're never going to have the same type of experience because we don't have the Icaros or whatever the lyrics are for the songs that they sing in the lodges out west and down south. We're not. I really think those words have an effect, or have they can create an experience that is much different than one that you can produce on your own. So what we're doing is our own brand of just trying to figure this out and be with this experience. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful tool, and we really enjoy it. And I wish more people would use them. I mean, they're inexpensive, and you can have, and it's a great community builder too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I definitely believe the same about any cultural or religious tradition. Like I don't see why people would be, opposed to other people experiencing it. I mean, for instance, I'm, culturally Jewish, right? And I mean, if you guys want to go throw a bar mitzvah for yourself for no reason, I don't really care, like, I mean, that's cool, but, I don't know. It's kind of weird because more like indigenous cultures and stuff like that, it seems that we assume that people within that culture are going to hold their traditions and their ceremonies in like higher regard than anything else, and not want people to do it. But I imagine that's not always the case. It just seems in my mind like there would be people that would be upset about it. But yeah.
It's just I think it's just like a case by case thing, and like Rich said, it's not like they're copying it exactly how it would be done, in a traditional setting or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I would like to have that experience though. I mean, because it's got to be the type of experience we have is it's very bland and it's very singular. Where the tradition out west, when you have 20 to 30 full-grown men, bare-chested, right next to each other, it's a different ceremony where everybody's working together to achieve some sort of similar mind state, as opposed to when I go in there, I'm with me, and there's a community, but we don't have it set up where we really bond with that community. Sometimes we can, and there have been some lodges where a stranger has become a brother. But that's happenstance, not the programming of it.
Yeah. Is there any like hallucinatory effect to taking it with, or like experiencing it without substances?
I don't think so.
No.
I haven't experienced it. If you
Yeah.
know how to do holotropic breath work, that's one way to get there inside the
Yeah.
lodge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, though, that would be a concern of mine. I mean, the biggest concern would be like dehydration. Like, do you guys just, is hydration and hydrating a big part of beforehand and the prep work?
Yeah. Everybody knows to. We have a pretty tight group, and so about 24 hours early, a text will go out, say, hey, we're doing a lodge tomorrow. If you can come, make sure you hydrate. And so everybody will be drinking water. Some people fast for 12 hours, 24 hours, because you don't want to go in there with a full belly.
Yeah.
I've done that. But say your question again, Stan.
Well, I was just wondering, like, for the prep work, what else is done? Because I mean, I used to, yeah, I used to go to a rec center nearby me where there's a steam room, and I know it's probably nowhere near the same level of intensity of heat, but I would challenge myself. I treated it similarly, where I would challenge myself to be in there past my comfortable point, and just work on breathing. And you can definitely find a center in your breath and the heart. I've definitely experienced that, and when you enter that meditative flow, it provides just like the enlightening feeling and like the great experience of it all. But the biggest part for me was the hydration beforehand, because I didn't want to come out feeling dead, and a headache because I didn't hydrate before, and I would often forget that, and the bad experience would happen. So I feel like it's tenfold with what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's more you convince yourself that it's tenfold more than it
Okay.
actually is, because we all get hydrated, and one of the thoughts that comes up is you didn't drink enough water. You're losing so much water. Your heart is speeding up too fast.
Mm-hmm.
I keep like a check, constant check on my body. Like, this hurts. Oh no, you should probably lay down and catch your breath. But it's all going to be okay, because you've fed your container, you've given it enough water that it doesn't matter, and you're fine in there, and you've done it before. It's just one of
Yeah.
those things that you got to bring yourself back to this idea that it's gonna be okay, and you just gotta be right here. And even when the thoughts come of that's just paranoia coming up,
Yeah.
and just it's hard to let it pass, especially the dehydration part. But
Mm-hmm. That's nuts, though. This might be a dumb question, but how do they move the rocks?
they usually have a pitchfork,
Oh, okay.
move the logs out of the way, and then scoop them up. And then somebody will usually take pine tree branch, brush it off, and then we use a turtle shell to pour water on the stones.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean going back to where you're talking about like worrying about your body and what's going on with it, like, I mean, honestly, the physical science coming out shows that being in a hot humid environment, well, not humid, but a hot environment like that is like actually really good for you with creating heat shock proteins. Joe Rogan talks about that all the time. The anti-inflammation and anti-aging qualities and detoxifying and all that. Like, I mean, it sounds like maybe if not a sweat lodge, like a sauna kind of situation, the infrared sauna stuff like should actually be a part of like everyone's kind of wellness repertoire kind of. And I would think that that's maybe something that at least I would use to calm myself down in there if I was worrying about my health while I was in there.
I've been sweating. I do hot yoga three or four times a week now. I love my skin organ, and exercising it through sweating is so cleansing. and getting in the coming out of that lodge, you're in there for anywhere from an hour to maybe two, and you've been hit with all this heat and this humidity and this intensity, and at the very end, that last round, everybody just collapses into you feel like mush, where the muscles are melting off your bones, and you're being absorbed by the ground underneath you. And so when you come out like they call it the womb, and the more I spend time in there, it feels like a womb where you're cut off from the outside world, and at the very end you're very relaxed, and it feels like you haven't relaxed at all. None of your muscles have been relaxed this way. It's similar to the being at the end of a float, and so you're just melted into the ground after this experience with all your good friends, and then you hop out and you have the intensity of the world, and it really feels like it's a good analogy for the womb is a good analogy for that experience.
Mm-hmm. How, if you wouldn't mind, could you go through like how you experience the sweat lodge with, like you said, a 2.5 or 2 gram dose of mushrooms? How do you time that out, and what is the experience like?
I've done it a few different ways. So we usually dose as we're getting into the lodge, like at the fire, or maybe we'll eat as we're setting the stones up. We want to make sure everything's out of the way first.
Yeah.
All the stone, we have all the equipment, we know what to do, and anything that we may need, and lots of water. So we'll pound water for that 2 or 3 hours while we're sitting in front of the fire. And so we'll dose somewhere in that time. And as you come up, you'll just stare at the fire, maybe engage in a little bit of conversation. I really love doing yoga right beforehand, and it's amazing. You get these people who you look at them on the street, and they got high and tight haircuts, and they look like they would never engage in any of this type of what I consider weird activity, where I'll do maybe 30 minutes of yin yoga and just really relax into it to get the body relaxed. Then I'll meditate. We did this about 6 months ago. I started doing yoga, and two other people, one other guy and a gal, joined me. And we just kind of did yoga together for 20 minutes while we were coming up on mushrooms. And so while I was in a child's pose, I got a tour through my intestines, and I was looking at all the DNA inside my intestines. And then we came up, we finished the session, then we meditated for 10 minutes or so, and then we got called over to do the lodge. And we all got naked enough, hopped in the lodge. And the mushrooms make the experience more intense. And there's a lot more paranoia on my end. But if I have some experience either with mushrooms, and I've done it 4 times in the last 6 months, or if I have a decent meditation practice going on, then I can get through, or a good float practice is even better, to do a bunch of floats before a lodge, because then I can get to that point where whatever is making me paranoid, or whatever thoughts that are coming to me, can be dismissed. And then within that sweat lodge experience, you can connect using the mushroom to other usually the mushroom tells me what's going on, and I'll set an intention for it. Usually it's just, I'm curious and I want to explore. Just tell me something. I'm just really interested in this experience. I'm interested in the connection between me and my friends, me and reality, me and my domesticated life, and me and the mushrooms. So tell me about this. This is interesting. And anytime I take them, it tells me something new, or gives me a new way of looking at things. I can tell you the second time that I took mushrooms while I was in there, it was just me and my buddy, and we had all the time. We had an entire night to do this. So it was on the second round as I was coming up, and I was just getting this kaleidoscope. And I love the way my eyes get, or other people's eyes get, when you have those closed eyes visuals, and you can tell that there's something going on between their head because their eyes are wide open, but their eyelids are closed. And I'm sitting there in awe of all these, of this kaleidoscope of colors. And I hadn't had a good relationship with my father for about 8-10 years. Hadn't really talked to him. Mad about something. And I had held on to this. And so I was in a box. I was in a red lined box in my head. And inside the box was me. And then my perception was there is Rich inside that box. So that was my first perception of, I can look at myself from the third person. And that is a thought that kind of triggered me off into more exploration into altered states. But then my face, which was red and kind of lined out, it was made of lines, transformed into my father's face, and then back into my face. And this is all it did. And it was the mushroom showing me that you are just another thing of your father. And the problems that you have with your father are your problems. And there's no real reason for either of you two to be mad. There's really no reason. It was illogical. It didn't make sense. And at that moment, I forgave my father and myself for all of it. I just put an end note on that period of my life, and moved on. Then I had the rest of my sweat lodge trip, and then the next day I called my dad. I sent him a text. I said, "Hey, give me a call." So he gave me a call. And I said, "Let's get together for lunch." And at lunch, I told him my experience, and I said, "You know what? I don't know how this went awry. It doesn't really matter, and I want a good relationship with you, and this is my first step." And he said, well, "All right, great." And it's what he wanted, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little scared because he knew his son was doing drugs in the woods with a stranger. And he hadn't really talked to me. He didn't know me for 10 years. So I can see where that'd be concerning. But he trusted me, and he said, I'm here for you if you ever need me, that sort of thing. And it was a really good healing experience there. But what I really like about the mushrooms, and I'm sure you guys do too. Sometimes it's just a snap of a finger, and like you've been an idiot this entire time. You've been looking at it this way. If you look at it this way, it looks a lot easier, doesn't it? It's just a flick of a wrist. There, it's done.
Yeah. Damn, that's awesome, man. That's good to hear. What is the experience like coming out of the sweat lodge while you're on mushrooms? I'm sure that has to be like so euphoric. I can't even imagine it.
It really is. It's one of the best feelings, because you're coming out of, especially in the winter. I did it on the winter. I try to do one on the winter solstice. Wow. And there was a solstice 5 years ago or so, and there was snow on the ground. There wasn't any snow on the ground when we went into the lodge, and me and 3 buddies went into the lodge, and we dosed mushrooms, and it was just a magical experience where you're in there and you don't see the outside world, and you're in this experience that's very intense, and you can't even think about the outside world because you are in here and in your head. And so all of this is going on for a couple hours, and finally the door pops open and I get a peek outside, and it's snowed an inch or so out there. And we're in this valley in Kentucky, and the snow's falling, and it's even more magical. So we hop out, and it is cold. It's probably 25, 30, but I run hot on mushrooms, and so I'll get really hot. And that snow was feeling great. My buddy went out and he rolled around in it, just made some snow angels. But it is a very euphoric effect, and it lasts for maybe a day and a half. Afterward, you just feel relieved, especially when you get something out. If you're in there and you can purge something.
Yeah, that's I had kind of the same experience. on my last trip with the Syrian Rue and stuff, where I was, sweating and I was just trying to calm myself down, and I was in the hot tub and I started feeling, super, like, I was like, I'm wet, but I feel like I'm like even sweating more. And I was like, I got to get out. And it wasn't snowing, but it was, probably like 40 degrees out or something. And it was just cold enough that, like, normally if I wasn't on mushrooms and I got out of the hot tub, I'd be like, oh, that's cold, and run inside. But and I was naked, and I just like stood there like in the cold, and that, like, until it sunk into my head, like, okay, it's actually really cold. I mean, I was just like, kind of like for a minute, just like standing there in the cold, wet, and like it did feel really euphoric. And unfortunately it didn't last very long, because once I went back inside, I was back to sweating. But but yeah, that cold shock is really, really good. So I've started, when I float in the tanks, when I get out, I put the water on cold and take the cold shower. And I think kind of the same way, like, you embrace the heat and teach yourself to embrace the heat in, like, the sweat lodge or in saunas or whatever. I think, like, learning to embrace the cold is a really good mental technique as well. And so I've started doing that. I don't take any cold showers at home. I probably should, but like, just coming out of the float tank, where you're just kind of in this warm, comfortable environment, and then mixing it right away with that cold shock, creates, like, kind of this in-between state of, like, relaxed from the tank, but also invigorated by the cold. That's pretty cool. And it's hard to kind of create that state any other way, really.
I do 1 to 2 cold showers a day. So when I do a float, I will I'll hop out and I'll enjoy the feeling of being warm, because I'm walking around cold all day, but like high energy, I like it, I enjoy it. A lot more clear in my thinking because of cold showers. But after a float, I love feeling loosey goosey, and like I just ate a pop brownie or something, walking around with a big old smile on my face.
So we talked about float tanks the other night. What substances do you like using in float tanks, or do you like doing them by, sober, or how do you like that?
I've only tried. I smoke almost every time before I go in, and I try to get too high. And it's a comfortable environment, as you know. Walking in, everybody seems okay with whatever you're doing, as long as you look like you're safe. And so I know the people at the tank. I'll smoke a quarter gram or so, maybe a half gram, and just get way too high and paranoid, so that I can manage that when I get in there. Because once I get past the panic of being in the tank and being super high, I can get out there and work or play, And I've tried a microdose of LSD, and I didn't get much out of that. It was more visual, but it was less. I didn't know how to use the tool, maybe. And I've done it sober too, and that's great too. Anything I go in using relying on my techniques and relying on the float practice that I've developed, instead of relying on the drug tool anymore. I really don't. I think the mushrooms would kick me right out of there. What are you doing? It just does it. Peanut butter and spaghetti sauce mixing together, doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I've with psychedelics, I've just done microdoses. I've done like kind of a double microdose, probably like 20, 25 micrograms in there of LSD. And I think that's about the deepest I've gone meditation wise well, in the tank, but just kind of ever really, to, you know, kind of go to that waking dream kind of state, and just really be in my head. I've found that, you know, I did it sober for my first time, and I like was just kind of bored, you know? And so like using substances as a tool kind of taught me how to not be bored in there and how to use the time appropriately, to where now if I do it sober, I can actually, you know, meditate in there and stuff like that. One time sober, I just kind of, I think I fell asleep actually. But you know, it's just kind of like total relaxing, but not really like thinking about anything or doing anything. I again, like you were saying with smoking before you go in there and being kind of like the paranoia aspect of that, I've found that, and again, it's, you know, following Joe Rogan's advice and whatever, but he always talks about edible marijuana in there, and I have found that to be better than smoking beforehand. That I get less paranoia with edible anyway. So I've found that pretty good, but it's hard for me to get the right level and to time it right, because there's been a couple times where I'm like really high when I go in there, and then I find myself just kind of like almost swimming around the tank and not really like calming down and focusing. Like I'm just enjoying like being in a tub almost. And so like that's pretty hard to dose for me. So I think kind of the key is just to have a little edge provided from either edible cannabis or a microdose, and then just kind of, you know, you use kind of the tools I've learned of being able to calm down and separate my mind from my body, with as little help as possible from substances almost. But you know, I wish I could experiment with it more. Like I only go once a month. I wish that I could have one in my house and kind of start every day with it, you know. I agree with what you're saying about doing higher dosages, and that it wouldn't work, but I would like to try it. It's just, I run through the problem of like, I'm either going to need to take an Uber there or have my wife drop me off, you know, like I want to have enough mushrooms in my head to where I can't drive and then go in a float tank. And then, but the logistics of that don't work out, you know? So yeah, I mean, I really, I envy anyone who can afford to have, you know, a float tank in their house. Yeah. But I mean, I definitely feel like with the higher dosages, you know, cause I've gotten to this place with microdosages or microdosing in the tank that, you know, you're in water, but there's an incredible depth to the water, and you feel like you're in like a warehouse size chamber that's filled with water that is deeper than you. And I would love to kind of see what that feeling was like, you know, totally in a psychedelic state and not just on a microdose. You know, unfortunately, I mean, maybe there's a whole host of things where your imagination could take over and you think there's stuff in the water with you and stuff like that. It could get scary, I guess. But, you know, there's a whole host of things I would like to experiment with flotation tanks that I doubt I'll ever be able to, unfortunately.
I read a couple of John Lilly's books, and I'm really interested in IV ketamine. I've never tried ketamine, but just the way he was able to dislocate or dissociate from his body and then work out there, like that meta-programming and programming state that he talks about. Are you familiar with this, guys?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I've gotten there, and I've been able to program and meta-program the way I perceive opinions, narratives, variables within reality, all these different things. And I've gotten out there and looked at an opinion or a preference that I've had about something and said, this needs to be changed. I'm either going to get rid of it. And it's a visual thing. It's from the hind part of the brain. It's not like a hypnagogia. It's and I'll just get rid of it. And I would love to play back in that territory, or just maybe just observe, because I'm very comfortable with the programming that I currently have and the way I operate and the relationships I maintain. But I would love to get out there and see how that space works. Probably read some more on Lily, but getting with trying IV ketamine would be an interesting experiment to if that's the route he took to get to that metaprogramming state. Now when he talked about Echo and the aliens or what control organization, the universal control organization, whoever he was talking to out there, that seems interesting, but I don't think it's a place I have interest in going.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, he I think he was well on his way to discovering that stuff before he did IV ketamine, though. I mean, I just mean like some of the stuff with acid that he got into and everything was pretty nuts. I mean, have you ever read about his experiment with like this cohabitation thing with this woman and a dolphin? And they like they had this house that they like half flooded with water, and like this lady lived in the house with this dolphin, and then they started introducing LSD into the equation, and like they were giving LSD to the dolphin and the lady, and she was living in this house with a dolphin and sexually pleasing it and stuff like that.
I have. My favorite story to tell people.
Yeah. That, I mean, that's just nuts, and that's before he even created the tanks, I believe.
What tanks have you guys used?
I don't know what model they are. I mean, it's like
is it the traditional like samadhi where it's just all blocked off in a square door?
Oh no,
the ones down here we have two of those down here, a big one and a medium-sized one. Well, and the ones up by Ruben have the big clamshells. Those things are huge.
Oh, okay. Like the Float Lab ones?
Yeah, that's the only one I've ever done.
Gotcha. Yeah,
there's a darkness that you get with those clamshell pods. I've gotten so far out there in those things. It's harder in the samadhi tanks, but it's doable.
Yeah, I mean, in the clamshell ones, what I've experienced, I mean, anything you see is definitely in your head because there's no light. There's a little bit of sound sometimes that I've heard leak through, and unfortunately, and Rich, I don't know if you've been up to the one by me recently, but a kickboxing gym went in next door, so like there's like you can hear the music and stuff, and I'm like kind of like. I'm wondering if they complain to them because like, unless you go later at night, which is good. Cause that's the time I like to, but I tried going during the day and there was a kickboxing class and all you could hear even in the tank was like doof, 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 of the music and stuff, and it was kind of like, it's kind of disappointing. I'm like, couldn't they go to the other side of the strip mall? Like, do they have to be right next door to the Zen center, like,
Yeah, I at the float place I used to work at, we being in, major metropolitan area, we were in a basement of like an office building, and across the way was a nightclub.
Oh yeah.
So but we had an agreement, so they knew, our last round is 8:00. They'll be getting out around 9:30. Don't start music till like 9:45, 10. And they honored that, but there was a few nights that whether it was like a new DJ or something like that, he would be doing sound check and we'd have to comp floats just because of like how annoying it must be inside of those things.
I was chatting with some of the attendants up there, and they said that one lady had come out of the tank and she had sworn up and down that they were laughing while she was in there. So, were you guys laughing? Because I heard a lot of laughter. And they were like, no, it was just one person in the office. No, there was no laughing. It was just me here. I got a phone call. No, there was clearly people laughing. You're saying that was all in my head? And she was offended by her own laughter in her head.
That's funny.
Yeah. The attendant said, no, I don't want to tell you what's in your head, but we weren't laughing.
There's there's like, after working there for, I don't even know how long I worked there, probably half a year. The stories are great just because you get so many new experiences out of these people. And for the most part, everybody's extremely open about talking about it, and most people want to talk about it to compare it to other people's stories or to know that they're okay even. But we had like a meditation space that when you come out, you can go into that room, and, we'd give them tea or water. But you'd always ask, how was it? And you'd get people that were scared of it like that, or people that were just like so in tune with themselves, it seemed that they just went right into like the deepest that and beyond from where I've been inside of a float tank in a matter of like minutes in there. So it's cool hearing individual experiences. I've never had somebody come out and ask about laughter, but that's hilarious.
Yeah. I missed the chance. They were hiring at the place I go to, and I thought about it, and then I didn't apply. But I was like, man, not just to get the free floats, but that would be a pretty cool part-time job, for the personal, for hearing the stories and seeing the people that come in and, making connections that way, just like any other job. But, it's kind of a unique clientele that's coming in.
It's a little bit different. I've talked with the owners up there and by me, and the spot by me is really open to younger people into altered states and stuff like that. Whereas the one up by you, it's in that strip mall, and it's when they get a lot of people in there from the upper middle class neighborhood of just trying to relax. And so the discussions that you have on that one aren't as heady as the one we're currently having.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. I could totally.
Yeah, you get both, just because there's, at the one I worked at, they majorly marketed themselves like as a spa. So, you're going to get people thinking it's freaking spa day and go into that realm, not really, expecting anything more than the feeling of like a massage. It's not the same as somebody that comes in wanting to be introspective and open their mind up.
Yeah. So Rich, the other thing I wanted to talk about that we had discussed the other night was your story with breaking your back and the kind of the way that changed your like outlook on stuff. Would you want to tell that story?
Sure. Was it late October of last year? I had a buddy over. He was bringing me some pot, and we went up, and I carved a trail in the woods behind my house. And so we went up on the trail, and at the top of the trail is at the top of the hill where this trail ends is a big swing. And I was swinging on this big cord. It was a metal cord. What do you call that thing? What do you call it? Chain? No. Wire. There we go. So I was hanging from this. You can edit that, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'm hanging from this wire that I put up in a tree and was swinging on it. And while I was doing some sort of little backflip, the log that I had jammed into the wire had snapped, and my friend and my son watched me fall to the ground about 15 feet. I broke my back. I landed on a root from about 15 feet, rolled down the hill, and I woke up. It had only been maybe a few seconds, but I was out, like straight gone. And so I had frames as I was coming to in my head of things that had happened, will happen, and are not happening. A bunch of different things went through my head, and the present seemed like the past seemed like the future. And so my idea of time got all jumbled up too. So I come to, and I look at my buddy. I said, you gotta go get some help. And he said, no, you're fine. You just got the wind knocked out of you. I said, dude, I cannot move my arms or my legs, nothing. You need to go right now. I'm serious. And he said, no, you just got the breath knocked out of you. So I talked to my son, who was 6 at the time, And I said, Max, you need to go and go get mama and tell her to call 911. Can you do that? He said, yep. I was so proud. And he started walking on the trail. And it's not a far walk back, maybe 5 minute walk. And so I told my buddy, hey, you better get along with that kid. I'm sending him into the woods alone. You got to go with him now. Go get help. So they took off and they got some help. And so while they're gone, I'm managing this broken back situation. And I went straight back to military mode of that fight or flight. And I weighed all my variables, what's going on with my body. And I started with my fingers, trying to get them to work. And I got my fingers in my hands, and I could kind of move my arms. And then I started working with my feet. And over the course of about 45 minutes, I wanted to get to a spot where the paramedics could easily get to me, because we're on the top of a hill, kind of deep in the woods, deep enough for a team of medics to come get me. So I had to be concerned about it. So as I'm laying there, I realized this is really serious. And my only grounding point, the only thing that I really wanted to experience, was my wife's tattoo on her left arm. And I just kept thinking about holding my wife's hand, touching my wife's arm, and being with her. And that is all that mattered. It didn't matter how I got in this situation, what's going to happen. Everything crashed to one quick grounding point. Whereas my relationship beforehand was great. We had a great relationship, but now it sealed it all up. And at that moment, she became my favorite partner, my favorite team member, and the one person that I'm just going to be with forever and ever. And I knew it back then, but it's just nice to have that sealed up once again, or just shown to me. And so I'm laying there on the hill, and I crawl about 15 feet in 45 minutes. Paramedics come, and they before they can put me on the stretcher, they have to do some tests, or I can't really remember. It was really intense, and then it started really to hurt. It started to hurt a whole lot, and I told them I needed some pain meds, and so they gave me some, and then they put me on the stretcher sideways, because I would not let them stretch me out. So I was in the fetal position, laying down, face down the hill, with my head resting on a flip flop. And so they picked me up, put me on the stretcher, and then hiked me out of the woods. And I'm still on my side as I get to the ER. And I have to remember being in this ambulance. I look at this girl dead in the eyes, and she was so uncomfortable, this poor girl, with this guy who was in front of her with a broken back, in an odd situation. She was I think she was working with the university, just doing runs with them as an intern maybe, and so uncomfortable with this guy with a broken back, and I tried to muster a smile, and she couldn't give one back. So I get to the ER, and so I get to the ER, and the doc says, we're going to have to flatten you out. And I said, don't do that. And he said, yeah, this has to happen. So he showed me a fentanyl patch, or fentanyl, however he put that in me. He damn near blacked me out on fentanyl and Dilaudid and whatever it was, and then stretched me out. And that was, even though it was that cocktail, I was still, that was a whole lot of pain. And then I spent another 9 hours, and my wife had come to see me, so we were both hanging out in the ER. And so I hung out there with my wife and my brother-in-law, who was in town. And I just hung out with them as the doctors came and tried to put me into different not casts, braces. And then I was in there for 5 days as they took MRIs, and I just tried to deal with that pain. So they let me out after 5 days, because I have great caretakers here, and I had a family to come and see me through that tough time. And then, so coming home, they had set up a bed in the living room for me, and that's where I camped out for the next 6 months. Definitely 4 months on my back where I couldn't move. I could move, but I couldn't bring my head up. Anything that dealt with my back was done. So I laid there for 4 months, I guess, 4 to 6 months. I was able to get up and start moving about the 4 month period. And then my job was to heal myself. So I started with yoga. But in those first 4 months of being there, I remember at the hospital, I've been keeping a notebook with just things that come up in the tank and ideas that I have and stuff like that. Maybe write down a few stories. But while I'm in the hospital, I'm writing in my notebook, and I realized that I have this opportunity right now. And I'm not sure, I'm not a mystical person, although I practice as if it might be fun. I'm not a mystical person. I don't know what the heck a near-death experience is, but I might as well treat it like one. Because if this isn't a near-death experience, then I can get a lot out of it, because I know a lot of other people who have had one got a lot out of it. So I'm going to pretend as if this is a near-death experience. And then from that point forward, it was in my head. And so I laid there for those 5 days, and I watched some movies with my friends and family. But I had Alan Watts and Ram Dass lectures on repeat, and Terence McKenna lectures on repeat. And I was able, and that's what really got me understanding how deep you can go with your mind, or that you can work on a practice outside of the lodge, the tank, and this can be done anywhere. So in those 4 months, I programmed myself to understand McKenna and Watts, and yeah, I think that's my story.
I mean, it's an amazing story. It's super inspirational, because, not just the going through the pain and the actual experience of breaking your back, but it would be very easy in that situation, whether you had a broken back, broken leg, whatever, being immobilized physically, it can be very easy to have a negative outlook and just, let that lead to depression and, just ruin your outlook on everything. And I think, that's the important thing about Ram Dass and Terence McKenna and all of these people that, I myself and everyone that listens to these podcasts and YouTube and stuff like that, the people that we idolize or whatever, is not just their talk about psychedelics, but their talk about like perspective and outlook. And what an amazing way to experience their message, when physically you could totally be prone to have a negative outlook on it, but to listen to positive messages during that, I think is a really good way to deal with that. I listen to their message to have a positive outlook on life, where I'm totally capable of doing anything I want, but to be immobilized and, somewhat isolated, even though you're around, family and friends or whatever. That's such a great way to really soak in this message of consciousness, awareness, and just kind of the outlook on life. And I really think, to turn what could have been a curse into almost a blessing is a great story. It's really motivational, man.
I wouldn't recommend it, but it's one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah.
Just having that opportunity to put everything on pause, because you don't realize what the hell is going on in your life until you stop and watch it. And so I have these 4 months of my life. I have kids, I have a wife and in-laws and parents, and these people come in and out of my life, out of my home, and you get to watch all the people that care about you, and then you get to watch all the things that you're interested in, because you can't move. So you're just watching things all the time or listening to things. And the ability to just put it all on pause and then say, all right, well, what can I do with this? Because I have an excuse now. It really was an excuse. I broke my back. It was a great excuse for, you know what? I'm going to change this about myself. This right here was holding me back. I was concerned about these sorts of things. The Army mindset is very different from the psychedelic mindset, but they're both very intense and both very sticky. And so coming from a gym, and I owned a business, and you had the Army stuff going on. I had a personality that was built up over all of this, and it was nice to say, you know what, that was that personality. That's fine. I'm going to let that go. What things can I take from that old personality that I want to keep? And how do I want to keep them? And really just evaluated what I want, what I don't want. And in that process, about 4 or 6 months into it, I started writing, and I decided I'm gonna write every day, and I have been every day, and it's turned into something that I'm really looking forward to continuing. It's a great practice, but the watching it all go by gives you real good perspective on what's important, where you need to be. That's my take anyway.
Yeah. No, I like I said, it's really motivational. Like my dad, maybe 10 years ago, had back surgery. My brother, my uncle, and my dad, or my grandpa as well, all have spinal stenosis, which is kind of like a genetic condition, and like it's not guaranteed you'll get it, but like you could. So it's kind of always in the back of my mind that like I could have serious back issues in the future. And my dad had surgery, and where they like fused his back together, and so it's like they like fuse like 3 or 4 of your like lumbar region together or whatever. And not only did it really not do much for his back pain, but he was laid up for, however long it takes to recover from back surgery like that. And, my dad is a very intelligent person for sure. But I don't know like how much, kind of consciousness stuff he's ever like worked on and everything. So he's an intelligent person, but unfortunately a very negative person. And like I said, that was about 10 years ago. I don't think he's ever recovered from the depression he put himself in from being in that situation. He used to like read and, be very into stuff. And then now all he does, he took that time to do nothing but watch the news and get upset about politics. And he has not changed that outlook since then. That he just kind of, I don't know. He just like kind of like sunk into himself and like never left. And I took that as like kind of motivational. Like, I don't want that to ever happen to me. And then, hearing your story of how you handled a similar situation, it's like, yeah, okay, that's the right way to do it. Don't just turn on CNN or whatever, and
actually cut TV out of my life.
Right. Yeah.
And that would be the easiest thing for someone to do.
But it takes a lot of energy.
Right.
That's a sad story about your dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just wish there was because I really think it's a management of energy. Once I realized that I could just manage how much, like what I'm taking in, because it's real work to maintain this type of mindset, to be positive, to really enjoy life. I really think it takes work, especially when you're around people in your life that aren't enjoying their lives.
Yeah.
So it takes real work and focus to decide what makes you operate best, to behave in the kindest way. What things that you bring in. Like if I watch any type of news, I'm grumpy, so I have to cut that out. And and I get it. I got a good idea of what's going on out there. It's crazy, but cutting things out and finding the attention where it needs to be, where you think it needs to be, and then just tinkering from there. So if you think this is going to make you happy, but it actually brings you to be cynical, you go, okay, well, that did make me happy. Maybe I need to regulate it. So, and that's also a good. That's how the notebook comes in handy too, because I'll log anytime I use kratom for the pain, and I'll log anytime I eat kratom, just to keep my eye. I don't want an addiction, so I just keep my eye on it, and along with the thoughts too, so I can manage. I've had some issues with bipolar, depression, and mania, and so if I start feeling a certain way, I'll document it, and then I know how long my cycles last and what triggers them, and really that time alone in a very, very blissful state. I cannot explain. I got to a non-dual state at one point for it was probably a couple months of I'm just here and I'm here to be whatever you need me to be, and I'm more than willing to give you everything that I have. And that's when I started getting more energy in me from yoga. But then I had no way to release it because I'm just going back to laying in my bed. But it was a blissful state. But it takes energy, and that's lots of sleep and cutting things out. I think there are a lot of people in our lives that are asking things of us that we really don't want to give, but feel obliged to do and to be with them. And if you have a goal and what you want to do with your time here in reality, if you are really focused on it, then you just you got to find an excuse. I found an excuse and that was my broken back, to just cut things out that weren't serving my purpose.
Yeah. I mean, that's
because my ultimate purpose is to serve my family, and I need energy, I need focus, and a light hand. So I got to manage what comes in and how I use my energy. Otherwise, if it gets out of control, then I'm either a grumpy husband, a quiet dad, or just a jerk,
Yeah. I mean, that's, like you said, cutting stuff out is, it's a big thing with people. To feel stress, you're always like, I don't have time to do the things I want to do. And it's like, well, look at how much time you're wasting doing the things you don't want to do, or that are giving a negative, energy into your life. Like for me, like I'll admit it, I have like kind of a shit talking addiction, and I had to get like Reddit and Facebook and stuff like that off of my phone, because I can't have this, what I'm addicted to, in my pocket. And it just, I would waste so much time scrolling through just, stupid opinions by anonymous people that don't matter, just so I could like get a sarcastic jab at them, and I would spend even if it's an hour a day, like I'd rather spend that hour doing yoga or writing or whatever, if you fill it with something that's a better, use of your time. Like I think like that would cure, at least a significant portion of the stress that everybody feels. And so that's kind of where like I've been this last year of kind of reevaluating everything and talking with people about all the stuff that we talk about. This next year, like that's kind of like where I've been at, is like I'm gonna stop being upset at the things that take me away from what I want to do, and just not do those things, and then I will have the time to add all the stuff that I don't think I have the time for. And that's definitely like something I came away from my New Year's Day trip, as I'm still kind of like trying to figure out, like everyone that I've told has been like, what was the message you got from it? And I'm like, well, I'm still figuring that out, but that's definitely one of the messages. And, that was definitely your story is definitely motivation for me to, kind of continue on that path of like just trying to, have a better outlook on everything. And I'm hoping to be able to continue that moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely hard work though. I mean, for me, I've gotten similar messages to you, Ruben, where it's don't do this, do that, and you can see what you should do, and you can see what you shouldn't do, and you know how they make you feel. But at the end of the day, you're leaving that however long point of comfort, and that's what I struggle with the most is the starting point. And once I start, you can get going and things are well and you're feeling better and you reap the benefits of what you're doing and you understand why you're doing them very clearly. But the hardest part is leaving. I mean, leaving that comfort zone. I mean, you could be in the same patterns and the same habits for years. And all of a sudden you could have that, the snap of the finger moment that tells you got to put that behind you and you got to start doing this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're still answering the question of, should I do this or do that every day? And if you choose wrong, or if you choose something that puts you into the comfort zone, it's that short-term gratification that is so appealing and it's hard to avoid,
I like looking at it as if we're learning at the edges, if all of our experience, if the way we grow and the way we learn is at the points, if it's a circle, at the points at the edges where you don't know, and it is uncomfortable. And if you can get comfortable with that space of growth, any type of growth, and get comfortable with that little bit of discomfort, recognize what that feels like, and then just know that okay, that's the feeling that when I do something that's difficult or when I experience something that's foreign, then it's the skill of being with that and then knowing that okay, you did it once and you can do it again. Yeah. I love cutting out. I love cutting out social media. I've been off of that. I'm done. I divorced.
Yeah, I mean, and it's partly like, when you're going to cut stuff out, like you also need to be like honest with yourself, and that's where I'm at now. Is like, I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm addicted to starting shit on the internet and I need to limit my ability to that. Like even, Stahn posted our last podcast on Reddit, was like, hey, go upvote this. And I'm like, yeah, sweet. And then like an hour and a half later, I'm like, I'm not even anywhere near our threads starting a fight with someone, and it's like, what, why, like, why do I do that? But I just need to be honest and stay away from it,
Yeah. It's hard to do.
It is.
Especially because it's in your pocket,
Yeah. But after, a couple months, reality looks completely different. Yeah. It feels different. You're walking around. I compare it to traveling. Like I'm always traveling now because I don't, the culture that these people have created is a digital culture. And since I'm not connected to the digital culture, we don't have any real talking points to meet on. I don't know what's going on with the latest political drama, which seems to be the topic du jour.
Yeah.
And so I can walk around as if I'm traveling the world again. And then that gives me an opportunity to just be present with them because I don't know them. I don't know how connected they are to this digital reality, what stories they have going on in their head. So it's a lot easier for me to just be with a conversation.
Yeah.
Unless they want to talk about the topic du jour, and I just don't. I don't. If you bring it up, I just don't talk about it. It's not something. I'm an anarchist. We're not going to meet on the middle on anything. I'm an idealist. So
that's what
nobody's going to talk to me.
That's what I was just about to bring up, though, is that especially, I'm not sure how old you are. I'm 26, and people my age seem to default to, hey, did you see this? Or, hey, did you see that? As the talking point, And I mean, that could be Trump. It could be politics. It could be a meme, it could be whatever. But I mean, I'm definitely very far removed from social media as well, other than like promotions on the podcast and just trying to help spread all that. But I'm pretty far removed as well, and somebody will, even like my brothers will say, "Hey, did you see this?" And it's like, no, I really don't have an interest.
No, because it doesn't do me any good. So
Yeah.
you just gossip. At some point you realize that you can only affect what you can affect, and that whole process you can't do much about. So how does it serve you hanging out and discussing to other people why you're right and they're wrong?
Mm-hmm.
If you really feel that way, write a fucking book.
Yeah. Well, and it it's weird because there's so much talk about like, oh, in the future, like virtual reality will be like this, and we're almost already in the virtual reality, because even though you're not hooked up to a machine, just the flood of clickbait articles, the way that our devices all kind of shape what we see by what we search and stuff like that, like we're almost presented our view of reality as what's going on and stuff like that from our technological addictions. And so when you cut out the social media and you cut out all that, it's a completely different reality you're in. And when you go for a hike every day, or do stuff in the natural world and let everything come to you that is around you, unless you live in a terrible place, like it's going to be a better spot than like kind of the fear machine that tries to get fed right into your face from your phone, and I mean, God, how much, if it's that bad now and it's affecting people so bad now, when you can just turn it off, how bad is it going to be when we do have like fucking chips implanted in our body, or the crazy eye things like in Black Mirror, where we don't have phones anymore, it's just in our field of vision. It is a virtual reality already.
See, Ruben, I think that's, if you plan on being part of that culture, you can do that. And I say good riddance to them, but
yeah,
because I'm not going to. It doesn't. My goal is to have a cabin in the woods, and that's my family's goal. That's where we're trying to get. We know how to farm, and we can live off the land. We're just not going to participate in that reality. These are. I think what we're coming to is an opportunity where each person has to. You see it right now with digital media, or social media, where they can program their own perception. And when you get, especially on Facebook and Twitter, where you get locked into your own programmed reality of what you like, you're expected to always receive what you like, because in the social media reality, you are getting what you like. And so you can pick and choose and program your own perception of reality through the things that you feed it. And so if these people want to engage in that way, then that's great. That's fine. But those who don't want to be part of it aren't going to be part of it, so we're not worrying about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if those who are going to be, well, if you have problems with it, you probably are coming into it with problems. Because, yeah, as long as it's consensual in the future, which I don't see it being consensual because we're currently not consensual, but I can still drop out, or at least live in a reality where I think I dropped out.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's the key right there. Can you actually ever really drop out? But yeah, I mean,
I think you can if you create your own reality in your head. That goes back to John Lilly, the quote of either the things that you believe become true or are true enough that you believe them. So just pick your beliefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not an American. There are people who say that I am, and I get bills or refund checks, and I have to cough over some of my loot to a group of thugs that likes to bound people. But that's just something I got to pay the gangsters, man.
Yeah.
And I could move, and perhaps that might happen, but I'm not going to grant them any legitimacy inside my head. They are a group of jerks that puts people on lists and puts walls up around their nation and thinks that they are different from every other human. So good riddance to them. And they are not, the way I even view that organization is that's just an organization. That's not us. That's not all of us, even the people in it. They just believe that they're this thing, this character that's getting profits or pushing an agenda, whatever it may be. And this is a very self-centered approach, but it's the approach that I've adopted to better serve the people in my area. So for me, it cancels itself out morally.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that is a big problem with a lot of people's outlook on everything is they look too big, you know, like, I don't think we're ever going to solve the problems of any one nation because I think nations are too big to work perfectly. You know, it's communities that are important, and I don't think that's really self-centered to look at it that way. I know there's I forgot, there's some like sociological statistic of like that groups of humans only work perfectly up to like 65 people or something like that. I can't remember the number, and that, you know, everything goes to shit the more people you add to the equation. And I think we're kind of seeing that now that we're so much more connected. And you know, I don't know where that's going to
definitely becoming global.
Right. You know, I don't know where that's going to go, but you know, that's kind of like we were talking about, like the goals with this podcast and channel and the community we're building with this help find the other stuff, right? Is that like, at least for the people that can't drop out, that can't go build a cabin in the woods, at least we can be a little digital refuge to kind of recreate that scenario. Or maybe, you know, I mean, if I hope that's kind of how it feels to some people, maybe, but
it definitely feels like it. It feels like kind of like I'm on, like it's a coast to coast show when I tune in, where it's just because coast to coast to me they aren't any experts, right? Or materialist scientific experts. They're just people who are having these experiences. Yeah. And so when you guys have these people on and talk to them, I mean, we're all just things getting around on this earth. And it seems like it doesn't matter what comes before or after your legal name. Yeah. You're still having an experience, and you're having an interesting one. And yeah. And you get these people on to share it. I think it really grants some legitimacy to some of the ways we're using these tools.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know,
it's not even the legitimacy of any organization. It's the legitimacy within the person. When the person hears that another person is doing this and how they're doing it, and they have the effect of psychedelics breaking down that barrier of identity, then you have a great recipe for people to just open up and experience and listen to somebody's experience for what it is without judgment, and then say, okay, well, what does that look like when I try it this way? Or, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's why I should just ignore comments on videos and stuff like that where they're saying, oh, 20 grams is heroic or whatever. But that's the problem, is I don't care about them telling that to me. The problem I have is them spreading that information to someone that possibly could get a lot of benefit from psychedelics, but they took 3 grams and had a tough time. And all of a sudden they're like, well, I'm a pussy because this guy said to take 20 grams. Where it's like, no, don't, I don't want people to feel that their, reaction to psychedelic drugs or anything is, not valid because of some jerk on the internet said that he's a pussy, And so like, I'm just trying to be like kind of the counter voice, to that high dosing message, And I also, I think a lot of people always tell me, they appreciate my honesty and that like how open I am in trip reports or whatever. Well, that's also like, I really don't like the people that seem like they're kind of making it up, and like, I kind of want to be the counterpoint to that as well. And I think that's community building. You know, I think that's who I seem to be from my emails that I get and stuff. Those are the people I'm drawing in, are the people that, you know, aren't, you know, off in the woods with this stuff, that are kind of like realistic people that are trying to get a different perspective other than what society's giving them, but not necessarily, you know, go meet mantis people and machine elves and stuff like that, you know? So, you know, I don't know. I think that's kind of where I'm at with all this, is just like, and I've said it before, my channel and this podcast is not about how many people listen to it. While I would like people to share and spread the word and stuff like that, it's all about who and who is coming. And maybe there's some synchronicity to every single person that has joined the Discord channel or, you know, just watch the videos or whatever. You know, maybe there's some synchronicity and that it matters exactly who has been joining and taking part in the whole community. And, you know, I'm excited about it so far, you know? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. And I'm definitely glad to finally have you on, Rich. 'Cause I mean, I think you were like, maybe like the third person to email me too. I mean, I was looking through my emails the other day and yeah, you were, super early on in the process and just got buried by all the other emails that came in and stuff like that. But I think it was good to talk to you and everything. And, you know, it's kind of crazy that we live so close and stuff like that too. Like that was kind of cool. We went to the same college and everything.
No shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, let's try to do a lodge sometime this spring or summer.
No, I definitely want to. I told my wife about it and she was kind of scared. I'm like, well, I'm kind of scared too, but that's kind of the point. But yeah, it was, you know, her response was like, so you're going to go sit in your underwear in the woods in a tent with some guy.
I've done, and I don't know, 70 or 100 of these. My wife still rolls her eyes. It's too hot, Rich. It's just really hot in there. Why would you do that?
Yeah. Well, I told her, I was like, well, hold on. We may not have underwear on. No, but no, but, yeah, man. So, I guess we'll wrap it up, but, it was great talking to you. And, I definitely, like I said, your story's motivational and like you're properly, pulling off all the things that I want to do in my life. So talking with you has been really cool.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But
I'm going to go pick up my kids.
All right, cool, man. Good talking to you.
All right. See you guys.
And, yeah, for, you know, I hope everyone enjoyed that talk. Like I said, Rich is really cool. I've talked with him on the phone a few times, and I think the first time we talked, it was for about 3 hours. So definitely, you know, someone that you could talk to for the first time talking to him, and you talk for 3 hours is definitely you know, a kindred soul. And
We'll have to have him on again for sure.
Yeah, for sure. He's got a bunch of other stories and everything. I mean, he's a cool dude. And that's what this whole podcast comes down to, is I want to talk to cool people doing cool things and give everyone a platform, you know, to tell their story. And, you know, like I said before, it's a open mic for the psychedelic community. And I hope that's how it's coming off. I urge everyone to, you know, to go join the Discord server. The invite link is in the descriptions for all the videos. You can email me. I can send you the link. Like it's easy to get into. You know, it's just an app. It's free. But it's a real time discussion of all the stuff we talk about with everyone that's kind of part of this community. And it's growing, and there's some really cool discussions on there, some really cool links and everything like that. And then, you know, like Rich and I, you know, through this channel found out we live pretty close to each other. In fact, my first house that I owned was in the town that he lives in. You know, I mean, we're really close. So I want, you know, to urge people to join the Discord, because you might find someone that lives near you that is a kindred spirit and whatever, and you can you it's helping find the others. It's not just about, following me and following my videos and podcasts and stuff like that. I want to connect everyone, and the Discord seems to be doing that. So I definitely urge everyone to do that. As always, if anyone wants to call and leave a message for us to play on the podcast,
yeah, that's 567-233-1335.
Awesome. Again, thanks everyone, and until next time.